Hi, my name is Joe, and this is the first film in a Hybrid Manifesto. Video essay in the educational package called a Hybrid Manifesto. Several narrative layers in this film. The tram with us on it is leaving everyday life and taking us and dropping us off at Kunskapsparken on the edge of Lund, Sweden. And Kunskapsparken in English is the Park of Knowledge. There's this straight path going to the lookout point, the hill, and let's presume that the little hill is the goal of this video essay, or at least the figurative goal of this video essay. If there was a scientific article, well then, I would just send off my drone, skip all the juicy details on the way, so to speak, and we'd be there right away. If that was my approach, then you'd arrive there and say, wow, what a fantastic ride with the drone, but you wouldn't have learned very much. So there is this underlying metaphor about a journey of sorts, and along the way we learn new skills. So I hope your approach to this video essay is to stick with it. And not to play it at 1.5 times or 2 times the speed. That's sort of like taking a novel and speed reading it. In all of this educational material that I'm producing for you, I'm working as a one-man band, so to speak. I'm doing all the work. Everything I talk about in this educational package for you could be divided up into various parts. Videographers speak about the person who's the one who has something to say as the talent, whereas in a motion picture and a cinema, of course, you're talking about actors and so forth. But we also somebody who operates the camera. We have somebody who might be blocking out some of the light or adding in more light, or somebody who's just dealing with sound. But in this case, I'm functioning as a one-man band doing all the work, so to speak. Which has its challenges, but sometimes its advantages. You're seeing me now in early March. Some of the recording has been during February and now also March. There can be continuity errors, that things look slightly different, and it's the problem doing this kind of recording outdoors this time of the year in southern Sweden. There's a limited number of days which aren't entirely overcast and might be raining or snowing. So I have to pick the days that I can. So let's keep going and come along with me. In another one of my recorded parts of this large educational package, I'm going to take a closer look at some of the hybrid rooms for hybrid teaching that have been established at my university during the pandemic. And I will show how they are not really fit for purpose. They transform the students who are not in the classroom from potentially being participants in the education to just being mere observers of the instructional situation. I will also attempt to show an alternative methodology and alternative arrangements and placements of and portable videography materials that I use when I carry out hybrid teaching in a classroom. I've taken a somewhat different kind of point of departure and methodology compared to that my university did. We in academia inherited part of this in our lecturing, whether this be on campus, in real life in a classroom, or in digital form. Except maybe some of us did not stand and lecture to the camera during the pandemic. Instead, some of us sat in front of our laptops as if we were teaching, Instead, some of us sat in front of our laptops as if we were attending a meeting on Zoom or Microsoft Teams or Google Meet. you can replace the name of the service with something else that you might have used during the COVID-19 pandemic. In other words, we were supposed to be teaching using Zoom or Microsoft Teams or Google Meet, but instead, our approach, our choreographic approach, was that we were attending a meeting. That might have caused some sort of confusion on the part of the students, and maybe it also caused us to appear to be less engaging than we hoped we would be. So among many of those who were in front of their laptops and, so to speak, lectured to the camera, there might not have been a lot of critical reflection taking place there and then at some point during the pandemic. Thoughts about, what am I doing? Maybe I should be standing up in front of the camera and lecture. Now, some people might say, well, Joe, it was a crisis. We had to just do what we could. Yes, but the crisis lasted many months. And at some point, then there could have been some sort of critical reflection. Maybe we should be doing things a bit differently. Instead, it seemed like the critical ideas had to do with what kind of technical solutions there were, and not our approach to teaching. And then the style of speaking, the priest speaking to the masses, was adopted into the Studium Generale, which was the ancestor to present-day universities. And it has become to be expected that we lecture standing up. Yet, surprisingly, during the pandemic, what did most of my colleagues do? They sat down. They taught the students looking at the computer as if they were in a meeting. That was the sort of choreography which took place. No wonder the students didn't find it very engaging. So, despite the use of seemingly clever apps, pedagogical apps, and all the effort to try to get teachers to use them, because something very fundamental in the teaching was missing, and I'll be talking about that in coming lectures, and I'm going to use the concept of looking through a keyhole to in part explain this. Everything just sort of fell flat on its face. The students did not find most of the teachers engaging. And the university set up, and probably your university, if you're outside of my university, set up an infrastructure in the classrooms which was not fit for purpose. Okay, technically competent cameras, but was not arranged the right way. And my intention is to show why that's the case in a coming lecture, coming video essay. We can see all of this as being some kind of video essay, perhaps, but in several different parts. And then you can see why it didn't work. I mean, it's very obvious when I point it out. It obviously doesn't work. Since the instructors did not have what could be called a media presence, this undercut all the mural, all the woo clap, and all the Padlet and everything else. Those things were sort of just added on to this shaky foundation that was there. When I am doing hybrid teaching and I'm in a classroom, I just don't use any of the university's technology. As long as I have a Wi-Fi connection and a projector with a screen, and I can connect the loudspeakers to my computer, I can be in any classroom in any part of my university and do hybrid teaching. Because I don't need all the cameras and so forth which have been installed in place. I have at least 2 cameras and 2 computers, and I'm off. And if you look at the student evaluations of some of the courses I taught, they loved it. But why didn't that information in the student evaluations go further up in the organization? Maybe there's something wrong with the student evaluation and reporting and so forth process at my university. Just an idea. But that sounds like I'm getting off topic. In fact, at one point, there were students taking a course where some of the students, because it was an internship course, some of the students were in Costa Rica. Some of the students couldn't come to some of the learning activities besides the internship that are sort of linking the students together on campus. And I set up everything like that. And I posed a question to the students who were not in the classroom, the students that were there. And one of the students looked at me, did not look at the camera. And I said, hey, to the student, you're not supposed to be looking at me. Look at everyone in the classroom and look at the camera. And what did that student say? But Joe, we don't know what to do. None of us have had media training. And I thought at the moment, well, besides teaching skills and the purely technical skills of dealing with the cameras and so forth, and creating a suitable setting and having pedagogical skills, apparently I had developed media skills during the pandemic. What was obvious to me was not obvious to the digitally era-wise students, apparently, there. I've never taken a media course, and so instead I've, by trial and error, reached the point where I have some sort of competence. So when I stand up, what happens? I immediately command attention, as opposed to sitting down. And that's something which I'm going to talk a lot about in other videos that you have to see later. And I counteracted what I call the keyhole effect. And judging by talking with some of my colleagues at my department in the university, if that sample is correct, I would estimate that about 80% of instructors during the pandemic sat down and talked to a camera on their laptop. I stood up when I was at home or wherever else, and for some lectures, because I lecture in environmental studies, I took my equipment with me to a nature preserve, and the students loved it, locked away at home. They loved that during the pandemic, apparently. But I'd like to say that communication through keyholes isn't fun, and I've spent a lot of effort to try to figure out how I could widen the keyhole during the pandemic, and I'll explain more about that with that metaphor. Now, so my teaching digitally is not solely the priest speaking to the masses approach. But I'm sitting down again, and why am I doing that? I'm signaling to you that I am not the master speaking to the masses. Instead, I am speaking to you at a sort of similar level. I'm speaking to you as a colleague, as opposed to the master talking down to the masses, so to speak. Of course, there's a place for sitting and teaching with students in the classroom, but when I am on Zoom with students and I'm seated, that's when we have a tutorial or a question and answer session after the students have watched recorded materials. Or we have a flipped classroom with them, either perhaps in the university itself. So I will be seated at times via Zoom with my students, but it depends on the purpose of being on Zoom with the students. Very purposeful. Is it maybe something that's more like a seminar? By choreographic means, I can recreate the classroom, or I can create learning situations that are outside the classroom. And by my placement in the frame and body language, I am communicating to the viewers. Are we colleagues, or am I lecturing to the students? But for me, a video essay is a much freer form. I use the term video essay as opposed to a video lecture. First of all, the video essay might not be created for a specific course. Additionally, the video essay has other forms. I am only sometimes the priest speaking to the parishioners. At other times, instead, it's more like a theater. The stage is where I'm walking around and talking. And there are props, so to speak, that I use. And I refer to the background, and I position myself in locations as part of the entire story. We see the hilltop over there, and the sun is going down soon, so I have to hurry up to be able to make it to the top of the hilltop. That's the problem with filming outdoors in the winter months. There's a limited amount of daylight. So, we have to keep going. Some of the shorter videos you can watch in this educational package take the structure of what is called a listicle. That is to say, a list article. Whereas other videos that you watch here will have other narrative structures. The structure or narrative of this entire educational package mixes videos and text. The text is either a PDF in digital form or printed, depending on your situation. And you should be able to start from either this video or the text and go onwards, because they are linked and refer to each other. If you don't have access to the PDF, in the description of this video below, there should be a way for you to get access to that. Please recall, when you're watching all of this material that I've produced here, I don't know your subject, your academic discipline. I don't know your specialty. I don't know the topic that you're going to teach, in all likelihood. And so I can't tell you, and you can't expect to know by watching this educational package, to know exactly the best thing to do. You need to take everything you hear and see here and sort of translate that into something which makes sense for your particular subject, your particular topic, your particular academic discipline. If you are a colleague of mine at the same university, then it's possible that somebody might decide that I could actually help you do that. But that's not something which can be decided upon based on this educational package. So you're going to have to take in all of this again, and not watching ultra fast. You can of course use chapters in the videos and watch the chapters you want to. Additionally, as opposed to a traditional lecture in a classroom, you can watch and you can re-watch the various kinds of educational material in this subject about hybrid teaching, which I have here. We better keep going because the sun is starting to set. Idea for this material, this educational package that you see here on this YouTube channel, but also the printed material, the PDF, the text material, is to condense down 4 or more years of learning and practice into something which is much shorter. Some of you listening to this or watching this might think it's quite long, but there's really no way that you could take 4 years of learning and condense this down into a 3-minute video, as some people might think. I mean, I could talk about some of this in a TED Talk format, but I couldn't talk about all of it. Also, consider that using the video to talk to you, also the way I'm doing this is part of a way to try to provide you with understanding and experience. Part of the idea was also to condense everything down to what would I have liked to have known at the start of the COVID-19 pandemic. So that's what I'm trying to convey. Also, somebody who's just starting out their journey of having recorded materials and so forth. Not a recording of a lecture, but a recorded video lecture or a recorded video essay or whatever. This is an attempt to sort of jumpstart those people in terms of their skills and understanding and their practice. Another way would be if you are somebody who's done some of this before and feels sort of stuck, perhaps some of this can help reinvigorate or rekindle your interest. And as I said before, it's important that you, knowing your own topic, your own subject area, which I might not know very much about at all, I could make suggestions about how you could do your work, but I can't tell you exactly what to do it based on just watching what I'm talking about now. So time to do the last push up to the top of the hill before the sun sets. Come along with me. A message which I hope comes across if you stick with all of this educational material here is that it's not enough for you to approach all of this from a purely pedagogical perspective. It's not enough for you to approach this from a purely technical or camera specs and gear perspective. You also have to have, shall we say, a media production perspective. And you need to have all three of these to work together to be successful. Ideas of narration and storytelling also sometimes inform some of my practice. My experience is that if someone concentrates on the purely technical, the fantastic technical equipment on a university campus that are installed in rooms without understanding the pedagogical needs, that means the technology steers pedagogy, seldom a good idea. And also, if you just start with a solely pedagogical perspective and not knowing enough about media, that's not a recipe for success. In my case, and I talk about this in another video, I did a lot of work and trial and error all by myself. One of my strengths, so to speak, was not getting caught up in what my university was telling me what to do during the pandemic. I didn't follow most of the recommendations that were given to the instructors to use during the pandemic. My goal, and I explain about this more in another video with the word journey, I suppose, in it, was to try to, as far as possible, recreate conditions in the classroom in this way that we're seeing now, and without using various kind of pedagogical tools that disconnect me in various ways from interactions with the students. So I was at times thinking about media and video and film, and also thinking about how students would be watching this kind of material at the times which suited them the best, and that I could from time to time, say, pose questions that they could think about, and that, say, in a question and answer session or a flipped classroom, I could speak with them later and answer their questions and go further, perhaps in a live lecture kind of scenario. There are other kind of pedagogical thoughts that I've had, but I'll save that to another video. So we've reached the top. The sun is going to go down soon, or be out of the way. In the Western tradition, there's a lot of narratives, a lot of stories we talk about, a 3-act story. There's a lot of conflict, the bad and the good, and the hero, and so forth like that. If you take all this educational package together, video essays and video lectures and the written documentation, instead, the structure in my films and the text together is based on Kisho Tengo, or sometimes called Kisho Tenketsu. This is largely a conflict-free narrative. It's more like showing how life just unfolds. But there's always a twist, or at least one twist, a 10 as it's called. And maybe there's going to be more than one twist as we discover as we go along, because the entire script for everything is still being written. Parts of the text and the video manifesto contain shorter manuals, so to speak, either written down or shorter videos. They could be of, think about this before you do A, B, and C, or several do's and don'ts, and things like that. The idea is that this video essay, if you're not beginning with the written materials, kicks everything off. And that this video essay and some other video essays, together with the shorter videos and the text material, is one educational package. You can look at various parts at your leisure, go back and look at the shorter videos that are these sort of manuals as you like, and look at them in more or less any order you want. The sun is setting. The video isn't quite over yet. Thanks for watching, and I hope to see you in the next one. And at the end there'll be links to additional material that you can click on YouTube and go to the next presentation.